Welcome to Trauma and Transcendence, where healing meets awakening. I'm Amanda M. Dodd, your guide on this transformative journey. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Let's transcend together. Hello, hello, soulful seekers. Welcome back to Trauma and Transcendence. Today, as you are hearing this, it is August 15th. I'm going to be in the Salt Cave this evening, and we're doing a group past life regression. If you're hearing this and you're not there and you're missing out, and I'm so sorry because it's going to be a good one. In any case, I'm going to be taking a break from doing the groups in the Salt Cave, but if you'd like to, I am still available for private group booking. You can call a creative apothecary to schedule that. And business aside, as you can see, I'm back from Vegas. Things are good. Last week, you got to meet Vinny Brigance. I want to hear all about how you felt about that, what you thought. Did you enjoy that episode? And today, I have a brand new guest for you, and we're circling back to spirit releasement once again. So today I've got the wonderful Peter McLaughlin, and he just recently was in Vegas at Hypnothoughts Live, and I didn't catch his presentation, so I thought, what a wonderful way for me to get him one-on-one and to also share him with you guys. Welcome, Peter. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you, Amanda. Glad to be here.
So you just came through Vegas. That's a whirlwind all on its own.
Yes, and it was on top of Athens, Greece, Lake Tahoe, Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and Vegas was the last stop.
Wow, you just really did all kinds of back and forth, all different climates, all different everything.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. Did you have a favorite part?
It had to have been an island off of Greece that some people may have heard of called Crete. It's the biggest island that they have, and it was beautiful.
Yeah. Before you even said it, I heard it.
Oh, did you?
I did. I was like,
You're
Crete,
good.
you went to Crete. Oh, man. I'm pretty sure I've got some past lives there. Undoubtedly, you do too.
Yeah, the Minoan civilization was there.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Once had a QHHT client, had a mermaid past life in Crete or just off the coast of Crete.
Really?
And her granddaughter, who was also in this life, was a what were those? The Amazonian women.
Wow.
The tribe that was there. And so she witnessed her whole life. It was the most fascinating thing.
That is
really,
very interesting.
really fun. But today I want to talk all about your journey because it sounds like it's been fascinating. So you had a really scary life situation that opened you up to this work.
Exactly. Yeah. In 2003, I was volunteering to be a firefighter and an EMT in my town in Connecticut, and went through the physical. The physical part of it was great, and then the next day, the phone started going off the hook with people leaving messages sounding panicked, like administrators and nurses. And I called them back, and they said, "We think that you have Lyme disease and leukemia." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Wow.
Same day, two, significant diagnoses on the same day. And ultimately I asked, how long with the leukemia do I have? And they said maybe 10 years. And that was in 2003. So that started me on the odyssey that ultimately led me into hypnotherapy.
I'm imagining it took quite a bit before you got to hypnotherapy because for most clients, we're typically the last resort. They've tried everything else before.
I owned my own business at the time, and so I was able to put the business on autopilot, and I was able to do all the research that I realized my hematologist oncologist could not do. I was sitting in her office one day, and she said, "We don't know what causes this. We don't know how to cure it." And I saw a picture of her lovely family behind her, which is great. And I just thought, she must have, how many other patients? She's got a family at home. She can maybe give me 15 minutes. I, on the other hand, thought I could do this 30 hours a week. I could research this. And so I started doing that. And that research is what brought me by steps from the purely physical cause and effect into the power the mind has over the body. And then once I started practicing, I went even further from the mind into the spirit.
Yeah. Goodness. That had to be a really difficult, challenging time, but then also to be like finding things and making progress that had to just be a wild transition and exploration for you.
Yes, and it allowed me to formulate this theory that um, that a crisis really is like the Chinese character. The Chinese character for crisis is the same as for opportunity, and
Yeah.
that our free will determines whether we choose to walk through this metaphorical door that's been presented to us. And I also feel like the significance or the severity of whatever it is that you're encountering, I'm going to just speak for myself and say, I think it has a correlation with stubbornness. I'm quite sure that there were signs and signals on
Yeah.
multiple occasions prior to this, but I happen to need to get two diagnoses, which is getting hit upside the head,
Yeah.
metaphorically speaking.
Spiritual 2x4.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I often like to think of these opportunities and these points. So somebody I was talking to the other day, and they were saying, like, fate versus destiny and free will, how does it all work out? And I was explaining it this way because we were just at Vegas, and I said, well, one way or another, I was going to Vegas. Did spirit care if I took a plane, if I drove, if I took a train, if I carpooled? Nope.
Yeah.
Just that at that point in time, I needed to be in Vegas.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
so that's how I like to look at it, is that we've got the big pinpoints on the map, whether it's Crete or anywhere else that we're going to go to at a certain time. And then the quality of the journey, though, there's a lot of free will in there. There's a
Yeah.
lot that we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. And I also, I don't know if you probably do. I don't know if you take clients into like a life between lives phase and go to pre-life planning. But it does seem like there's as you know, see you nodding, that there's a kind of architecture of our lives that is agreed upon by us in coordination with our guides.
Yeah.
And there's free will there, right? So if you had planned to be born to certain kinds of parents or in a certain socioeconomic situation, you could say that from a spiritual perspective, that you had some agency in those choices. And then you're clearly planning other events for your life. It might be meeting a significant person. And I think the free will
Yeah.
is you're going to meet that significant person, but you may choose to just push her away and go in another direction.
Yeah.
I think that there's probably within the plan, there are probably like out clauses, opportunities for you to go, this is too
Yeah.
hard. I'm out. And I think I probably had one of those at that time when I was diagnosed with leukemia.
Um,
And I think my free will, and I know that people might say, well, no one wants to die, or very few people. I know people commit suicide, but I, I think it's really our spirit. What is our spirit saying at that moment? Our
yeah.
conscious mind may be saying left, but our spirit may be saying right.
Mm.
And I think that my spirit just, firmly said, no, this isn't going to happen this way. But the option was there. So
Mm.
I think that's another example of potential free will on a spiritual level as well as on a conscious level.
I really love that. I've always considered these opportunities as like a catalyst. Oh, that was the catalyst. That was the healer wound that initiated you into this world. But I never looked at it as the other side of it. Of, oh, had you needed a spiritual out, the option was there. I never looked at it from the flip side. So I really enjoy that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing that occurs to me too is it, I've heard it said, and anecdotally I've observed this to be more or less true. I can't say whether it's statistically true, but that
Yeah.
people often have major life crises around the age of 40. And
Yep.
I think my interpretation of this is that your higher self basically says, look, You said you were going to be on this path doing this stuff in this way. You're not doing it yet.
Yeah.
So kapow, let me get your attention. And I think for me, these twin diagnoses, particularly the leukemia diagnosis was significant enough to get my attention. And I would say it is for sure ultimately what got me off the old path
Yeah.
and onto this path. If that hadn't happened, that diagnosis, I wouldn't be doing this work. I probably would be divorced. I'd probably be dead, is my guess. I probably would have been a crappy father. I mean, I really think that, as you called it, and I love that term, the spiritual 2x4, is what I needed. I
Yeah.
wouldn't want anybody else to get hit by it, but I felt like in retrospect, I really needed it.
Yeah. That was the only thing that was going to catch your attention and make you actually look around and choose a direction at that moment.
Yes, I'm sorry to say it's true.
And, when we talk about choice points, I feel like there is always that choice of, if we're a little more open, if we're observant, if we're listening to those higher callings, then we don't necessarily get that grade of 2x4. Sometimes it's a bit smaller.
100%. 100%. And that gets into the
Yeah.
whole concept of stubbornness. So there's the sensitivity and the awareness. Am I being spoken to right now?
Yeah.
Or why is this happening? Why have 3 or 4 things, quote unquote, gone wrong simultaneously? Why do I have this pain somewhere in my body? And that if you're really asking, not just as a way of complaining, but as a real inquiry, it may lead you to why it's happening on a spiritual level. And to your point, you may go, aha, I got the message. Great. I'm going to do it. And now I don't need the escalation. I don't need somebody to start knocking harder on the door.
Yeah. I heard you. I surrender. I yield. That's like a regular conversation in this house. So for you, I heard you say that it was closer to 40. For me, the first real big one, I'm going to say 27. It was just time. It was time for me to leave that marriage and to enter into the next contract, which is my now spouse. And that was not negotiable. That needed to happen. And so it came together in a crazy kind of way. We ended up meeting on World of Warcraft, of all places, playing video games. Yes. I know, it's very uncommon from different countries at that. And there were several little things along the way, but the main thing that got me was that I was in that dark night of the soul of everything I do, nothing is working. I yield. Like, show me where you want me to go, because I clearly don't see it. And it's not that I'm unwilling, it's not stubbornness, it's that I don't see it, so show me. But when we have those conversations, all the doors open and everything gets a whole lot clearer, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's a fabulous story. Congratulations.
It's been wild. Yeah, it's not done. Still going. Still wild. So you began to do your own research. You began to head out on this new direction and try to understand things better and to figure out the stubbornness. How did you come across hypnotherapy or hypnosis?
It felt like kismet. It felt like, divine intervention in a sense. I owned this crummy business at the time. I had sold a security guard business and done really well with that. And I bought a second business kind of knee jerk because I felt like I needed something. I thought it could just be I check in on it a couple of times a week. Ha ha ha. It turned into like 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And it wasn't making money. And I was struggling and trying to build it up. And a person walked in one day and said, here, I want to ship this box. This was like a shipping and packing store. Mm-hmm. And the box said, Hypnotherapy Academy of America, Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's like, wow, that's really interesting. And I got into this long conversation with this woman whose sister was one of the founders of the school.
Okay.
And we talked for like 45 minutes or something. And I was just fascinated by the whole subject. And then I was watching the movie The Secret with my wife. And halfway through the movie, I looked at her and I said, I have to be a hypnotist. And she looked at me and she said, yes, you do. And so I checked out a bunch of schools, including the one that
Yeah.
was listed on this box. And it turned out the one that was listed on the box was founded by a guy who was a former paramedic. And at the time, I was a volunteer firefighter and an EMT, and I really identified with that world of the first responder. And they had a particular focus on adjunctive medical support for people. And I thought, that's where I want to go because I want to heal myself. The
Yeah.
guy's a former paramedic. I'm an EMT. I'm a firefighter. This is great. And so I called them, had a great conversation with them. They said they had one spot left for a class that was starting like in 4 days.
Yeah. That or someone was going to drop out. Either way, you were getting a seat.
That's true. That's probably true. Yeah. Yeah. So the next thing I
Yeah.
knew, I was on a plane, and my wife was amazing, watching our three little kids while I take off for 6 weeks and, immersed myself into this class, into the school, which was a fabulous school. I loved it. I felt like it was such a great foundational um, uh, education for
I'm
what came
not very
later.
familiar with that school, but is that Patrick Singleton? Was he one of the
He
Love
was there when
him.
I was there.
Love him. You have no
Yeah,
idea. Yeah.
yeah. He was the NLP guy, and he was there when I was there. I I thought he left later, and the school moved from Santa Fe to Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Maybe he went back. I don't really know. I didn't really stay in touch with the school or the people there, but yeah, I know Patrick, and he was
Yeah.
definitely there when I was there in 2006.
He has a really brilliant brain in terms of the way that he functions with clients. Initially, when I started, I came through Southwest Institute of Healing Arts, and so they recommend different associations of, they don't tell you which one, they say, here are some you might want to have in mind.
Hmm.
ACHE was one of them, and he's a longstanding member of ACHE. And the moment I heard him speak, there was just so much resonance of wisdom coming through in the way that he does his work. So I've been like a huge fan. And I don't know why, but I never see him anywhere. Like I don't see him at Hypno Thoughts. I don't see him in
Yeah,
other associations. And it's like, why is he hiding? He's amazing.
yeah, he is. He's a great guy. There were
Yeah.
some really wonderful teachers there when I was there. Teachers, mentors, classmates. It was definitely a life-changing experience.
If he was one of them, I have no doubts that you got an incredible training and education.
Yeah, yeah,
What
for
was
sure.
that like to come through that training?
Well, it was interesting because after I did the training there, I started a part-time practice, and then I studied NLP at the NLP School of New York City, and it was a really good school. And I started with the basic class,
Yeah.
and I got partway through the class, and I went to the people who ran the school, and I said, I already know all this. I
Mhm.
got it in my hypnotherapy training.
Yeah.
And it just surprised me that it was that comprehensive in terms of the NLP education, in addition to hypnosis. So I was very happy with that as a grounding, and it's allowed me to take this practice in a bunch of different directions and to blend NLP and and hypnotherapy. And also now, you were talking about IEMT before we went live,
Yeah.
which is the rapid eye movement technique, and I use something called havening, which
Yep.
is
I
pretty
love
much
that too.
pretty much the same thing. And I feel like it's so
Yeah.
seamless to blend all of these together
Oh, definitely.
as,
Yeah.
as needed. And I think that
Yeah.
school was instrumental in helping me to understand how to be in a state where you can just
Yeah.
pull out whatever you need for that client in that moment.
Yeah. With IEMT, we're actually working on the memory and we're just using the eyes as a cue. But the whole process is very hypnotic. And then I may have points within there. If something's happening for the client, I may take them into a deep somatic experience, or I might bring them back to the breath. At any single point, or if they're really having a hard time with self regulating, then I may take them into a havening sequence and get them to practice that at home as well.
Mhm.
But they all blend seamlessly. So for most of my audience, they might not know a whole lot about what NLP actually is. Would you mind expanding on that for them?
I think that's one of the most difficult things to explain.
It is.
The definition that stands out in my mind is so unsatisfying, the study of human excellence.
Yeah.
So basically, Bander and Grinder, the founders of NLP, and they examined how really good therapists worked, like Virginia Satter, and they came up with processes for helping other people repeat something that's excellent.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people might recognize is something that NLP would call anchoring. So you can
Mhm.
anchor an emotional state. If you can create that feeling, like through hypnosis or some other way of achieving success in your mind, you can
Yeah.
anchor it with a word, or you can anchor it with a color, or you can anchor it with a
Yeah.
sound or with a body motion or something. And then you can reinforce that anchor, and then you can fire it later to go right back into that state.
Yeah. So for me, the best way that I know how to explain this is grandma's cookies. Grandma made the best peanut butter cookies, and I could smell them. And the minute I could smell them, instant joy. Right? So that was the anchor. I was anchored for
Right,
instant joy. And so if I wanted to feel that instant joy today, I would go back and make a batch of cookies or just remember those cookies and let that joy come flooding back in. And so,
right,
what Peter is telling you guys is that we've all got these access points to different feelings and states within. And so,
right.
for some of you, it might be a smell, a sound, a sight, a memory, but we can press that button. And just like pulling a lever, we get the result we want.
Yeah. And
It's very cool.
the more I do this work, the more I'm primarily interested in what's going on in the client's body while we're going through something, because
Yeah.
the body is always speaking to us. Or you could say perhaps the subconscious mind is always speaking to us
Yeah.
through the body, or the spirit is speaking through the subconscious, through the autonomic nervous system and the body. And the body is speaking to us all the time.
Yeah.
And we live in this culture where we largely ignore it, or we say, oh, you have a problem, let's just numb the body so that you
Yeah.
don't temporarily have the problem. But I think the more sensitive we can become to the body, what's happening inside of the body, what visions might you be having in your head? What voices may you be hearing in your head? Right? Where are you carrying around heaviness in your
Yeah.
body? Where might there be a pain in your body when we're talking about a particular subject?
Yeah.
And how will that change as we go through whatever tools and procedures we're using? I think is enormously important.
Absolutely. And it's there. And I can see why you're passionate about getting to the root of the issue, given your history and how things have unfolded. But the body is always there as a means of communication, and it has all of the things that we're looking for, whether we've stuffed them down for a long time or not. We can always go back and unearth it.
Definitely. And
To,
NLP, as you know, has another concept which helps with that, which is called parts, or parts therapy,
yeah.
which basically says, okay, so if you're depressed, where does depression live in your body? Where does it live? And you begin to focus on that part of you. Like people say, part of me likes that person, part of me doesn't. Part of me wants to do this, part of me doesn't. So
Yeah.
we work off of that concept. And if the part of you that's depressed, let's say, lives in your chest, it's big. If you were to touch it, would it be smooth or rough? Would it be hot or cold? Would it be hard or soft? And then you can actually speak to that part and ask it what it needs in order to feel better, and
Yeah.
then deliver that feeling to the part, and then say, okay, now that you've had that experience, is there anything else you want? It goes, yeah, I want that. Deliver that feeling too. This is how, as you know, hypnosis and NLP is coming
Yeah.
together in a sense. And
Yeah.
then reveal what is the cause of this depression.
Mhm.
So this is what I mean about when we're asked to define NLP. It's so much.
Yeah.
That you have a body, you have a posture, you have emotions, you have thoughts, and each one of these three affect the other two. So if you change the quality of your thoughts, it's going to automatically change your emotions and change your body posture. If you change your body posture, it's going to change your emotions and your thoughts. Like, these are all intertwined. which is a really important insight and awareness
Yeah.
in order to bring change. Or the other one that I love from NLP is the what is it called? It's interrupting a pattern interrupt is what they call it.
Yeah.
So if you're walking down this really difficult path, if you're in pain, and I'll give you an example from being a firefighter and an EMT. I come up to a motor vehicle accident. Someone is in the car. That person is screaming in pain. The paramedic looks at me as a firefighter EMT and says, "You take care of her," because he doesn't want to deal with this person who's screaming. So I walk over to her and I say, "What do you need in order to feel better?" "Parts." She said, "A cigarette." I said, "Close your eyes." Imagine you're taking a deep drag on the cigarette.
That's not usually how we do this in hypnosis. Normally it's the other way. It's great though.
She's in a
Yeah.
hypnotic state because she's just been in a car accident.
Yeah.
She closes her eyes and I see her go like this. She totally calms down.
Yeah.
Totally. Like this. Or people who are in pain, and you can move them out of pain by interrupting patterns, by shifting their focus of attention from their leg that's broken and hurts to some other part of their body that doesn't hurt, to take them from where they are, which is sitting in a car that's, in the aftermath of a car accident, and there's all the lights and sirens, and take them to a mountaintop, take them to a beach, and suddenly you see this person go totally calm down. Totally relaxed.
So how did you get from there into the more spiritual aspects and realms of hypnosis? 2x4 number 2?
Thank God, no.
He's got it. Awesome.
Thank God, no. I would say that it's just like imagining walking along a path or driving on a highway. How did you get from Nevada to California? Well, you just kept driving along that road going west.
So it was just destined that you were going to get to a certain point on that road?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because anybody who's involved in any profession, which is most professions, and that's problem solving, I think is going to constantly be looking for ways to more efficiently and more effectively help solve the problems that you run into. And for me, there's an Einstein quote: "You can't solve a problem at the level at which it was created. You have to go up a level." And in this work, to me, that really means getting from the purely physical cause and effect into the mental processes, and then from into the mental processes into what's above that, which is spirit.
Yeah.
And I prefer to solve a problem at its core, at its root, with the highest level we have available to us.
It almost takes me back to the first time I heard Roy Hunter speak about parts. It was actually during COVID. I was still relatively new as a hypnotist. I hadn't been to any big conferences or anything exciting yet. And it's a weird thing to be a hypnotist because we're kind of in our own bubbles. Unless you're part of an association that drags you out of the house, you're just in your own little ecosphere, And so there was Roy, and he's talking about spiritual parts therapy. And it was like something just clicked for me in that moment. That was one of the best presentations I'd ever seen him give. It was a virtual one. I wish I had purchased it and saved it.
Wow.
I think it was Hypnosis Summit or Hypno Summit. That was back in 2020. It was really, really good. But for me, that kind of opened.
I remember him, full disclosure, when I'm on the other side, it's difficult it's easy for me to go into a very light trance, very easy. And I do it every day for myself. But a super deep one, the first time that ever happened was in a class with him.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, this guy's got it going on. He knows what he's doing. And I bought his book immediately and talked to him, and that was a memorable experience.
I think he's a catalyst for a lot of people. He's like a beacon. He just switches them on, and I think he takes them right from clinical into the spiritual. At least that was a big part of it for me, for sure.
Mhm.
Initially, when I started, I was purely clinical. I was very interested in resolving PTSD and trauma, and I was very driven by that. And more, I think what was happening was I was having these client sessions that were just missing something, that it wasn't quite getting them there. And I started reaching for resources. And I remembered Roy's spiritual parts therapy, and okay, let's bring in a guide. Let's bring in an angel. Do you have a loved one in spirit who you want to show up for you? Anchoring something bigger. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I read a couple of books that helped me understand what to do next in terms of the spiritual work. And my first client was my eldest son when he was 8 years old. And I will never forget this. I I brought him to meet his spirit guide, brought him to the Life Between Lives. And he was and it involved a past life too. He was a Native American, and he was distraught because he and the rest of the hunting party had killed a bear. And so I asked him to speak to the bear and to apologize to the bear for killing the bear. And what really stands out, and the hair still stands up on my arms when I remember what this 8-year-old boy said immediately, because I said, "What does the bear say to you?" And he said, "When life is given for life, a higher purpose is achieved." As an 8-year-old boy,
Yeah.
instant answer. And I thought,
Yeah.
okay, we're really onto something here. Like
Yeah.
this is very important stuff.
So, full disclosure for people who are listening and don't know this, when you become a hypnotherapist, you're not technically supposed to practice on family. But um, inevitably, our loved ones want help. They don't want to see anyone else. And so, when my spouse, who was a 20-year tobacco chewer, I had not had any smoking cessation people up to that point, wasn't in my interest. It's just like, no, that's not what I want to focus on. Um, he was ready to quit, and I'm like, great, who can I refer you to? Do you want a man? Do you want a woman? I can't wait to see like what colleague to pull out and refer you to. And he's like, no, it's you or it's not. And I'm thinking, oh man, this is disgusting. I want him to stop this. It's been 20 years, and I was worried about like his health and stuff. And so he really showed me that smoking cessation can be due to really big, deep reasons. And man, did that open up my eyes, because his actually came from soul loss. And that's the whole reason he was using the chewing tobacco, where they stuff it in their lip and it sits
Yeah.
there and you can see like the awkward bulge and they're just swallowing these toxins. He was using it to fill the missing part of his soul, which was taken from his previous marriage and just the trauma and the abuse. And it's like, oh, there is depth to this.
Yes. Yeah.
So I practice on my spouse often, and we laugh and we say he's my guinea pig, because ultimately he's always willing to let me work on him. And so when I did the QHHT practice session for the first time, he was my first client, and we had one of those hair raising moments that you were talking about with your son. And that's, I think, when you can practice on a family member and you're like, hold on, there's a deeper insight coming through, and there's no way that's my spouse.
Yeah.
So I regretted not recording the session. With the Dolores Cannon past life, at some point you get to the higher consciousness, and sometimes it's palpable. I could feel this presence in the room. The lights started to flicker. The hair stood on my
Oh.
arm, and his voice changed. He's one of those somnambulists who remembers nothing, and his voice
Mm.
will do a drastic change. And I'm asking about why he's got chronic pain. And this voice comes through and says, "This is by design." And I'm just looking at him like, who the hell
Oh.
are you?
Yeah.
Like, there's no way my spouse would speak like that.
Yeah.
But if you don't practice on your loved ones, you don't always see it in clients. It's different because you don't have that same level of rapport. But when it's a loved one, something undeniable happens in me. And it sounded like it happened for you too, where the hair raised and you're like, wow, that's really high insight for an 8-year-old.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've said to people over the years when they've asked me, do I work with children, smaller children, I say only with my own.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. Like, uh, I don't think anything negative would happen at all, but I don't want to do that kind of work with small children. But I
Yeah.
was comfortable doing it with my own.
Particularly without knowing the child, their resilience, how they self-regulate, they've been, because you don't know where a past life's going to go ultimately, but
No, and I've ended up working through usually the mother on behalf of the child.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, I wonder. So recently I learned about, and I'm forgetting the name already, but they use the meta, metamorphic, help me. um, One of the fields, it starts with an M. I want to say it's like the
Well, I think
metacognitive.
metamorphic would probably be the word. I
I
think
think
I'm,
that, yeah.
yeah.
And so there's this whole concept of using the metamorphic field and working through. So I actually just learned that instead of doing animal readings and communication the way that I do it, what I could do is just put the owner in hypnosis and
Oh,
have
yeah.
them have
Hmm.
the experience of their pet.
Hmm.
But that sounds similar to what you were just talking about.
Well, the thing that really I find the most extraordinary is when you work with a particular client on an issue, let's say that involves their parent,
Yeah.
and and they engage in forgiveness work
Mm.
at the highest levels of spirit, and then the client comes back the next session and says, "You're not going to believe this," and then they talk about the parent coming out of the blue who knew nothing of the client coming to the session or what happened in the session and apologizing out of the blue, that kind of thing. And I don't know whether that's this whether you would call it a morphic field or
Mhm.
I happen to call it the quantum field. That's
Mhm.
my way of thinking about this. The
Yeah.
quantum field is this plane of existence where everything that's ever happened, all possibilities exist.
Yeah. I like
Like,
the term collective unconscious myself, like the whole Jungian. I
mhm,
really believe in that we've got access to that and the whole
right.
100 monkey theory.
And I think
Yeah.
when you do that work at that level, you're actually interacting with the soul of that person in the quantum
Yeah.
field. And that because we're connected, tethered to the quantum field, that's why that person came out of the woodwork, not knowing anything about what happened consciously
Yeah.
and apologizing for being a jackass for their whole lifetime, just out of nowhere. Boom.
Yeah.
Again, I've seen this so many times.
And you have to wonder if at that point when the client was having the session, if their loved one was actually experiencing that in a dream or if
Oh, I think they
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure, even whether it's a dream or it's one of these unconscious processes that we're not aware of.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose you would agree with this, although I'm not sure that
Yeah.
we seem to be transmitter receivers,
Absolutely, I do.
and that we
Yeah.
can transmit into the field and we can receive from the field.
Yeah.
And I happen to believe that the biggest impediment for people receiving from the field is um, an inculcated, propagandized misbelief that
Mhm.
that's not possible. Or if you're
Absolutely.
able to do that, you're crazy and you should be medicated, and you'll
So,
be
yeah.
kicked out of the herd. But I
That's
really
right.
think that so much of it is encouragement,
Mhm.
is support. Like, no, you can do this. That's totally normal.
Yeah.
And then people will start to talk about experiences that they've had that they didn't want to share with anybody else because they thought that they would think that
Yeah.
they were crazy.
Or what I'm finding when I train mediums, it's identifying of, yeah, that's your clairvoyance. That's what that feels like. Now you know. Next time it fires on, you can acknowledge that's my clairvoyance.
Hmm.
So sometimes it's the identifying, but most of the time it is moving past the propaganda that we've been given and told of, oh, that's just your imagination. No, those are there's your very survival based tied into your nervous system, proprioception senses that are meant to keep you alive and function beautifully. We
And
just
and
expect
and I would say,
Hollywood.
and I'd go beyond even
Yeah,
further and say it's those senses that can connect you with the divine,
absolutely. Yeah, we're
including
part. Yeah,
deceased relatives
yeah,
and spirit guides and ascended masters and God.
yeah.
And it makes sense to me on a Machiavellian level that people who are in charge of a control system wouldn't,
Hmm.
knowledge is power. They
Yeah,
wouldn't want the average plebe like me to know
that's
anything
right.
about this
No, we're a
because
pain in the ass when we're connected. Are you kidding me? Nobody wants that.
exactly
No, I agree. So they do. They want us to believe that we are separate, and there is no separation. The only separation is illusionary, and it's in our mind. It's because we believe that we're separated.
right.
Yes. Oh my
And
God, I could talk to you for hours.
and the other thing that it has occurred to me too is that we live in a five sense reality, and if you can't validate something with one of the five senses, it's largely said to not exist. But then you ask someone, well, do you love your children? And the person said, well, yeah. Like, well, prove it. How can you weigh you can't with the five senses, but you know it's real.
Mhm.
And then you say, okay, well, what makes human beings, what is our greatest power? And if you compare us to animals, you would quickly come to the conclusion it's not our sense of sight,
Mhm.
even though we live in a visual culture. It's not hearing, it's not smell, because there are animals that do those things way better than we do. It's not our
Yeah.
physical strength, right? Our
Yeah.
greatest power is actually the internal abilities that we have
Yeah.
that I would say come under the larger umbrella of the imagination.
Yeah.
And underneath that umbrella would be things like creativity, inspiration, insight, epiphany, all of the things that have allowed us to create things that don't yet exist, like a
Mhm.
plane, an airplane.
Yeah.
We didn't have those, 150 years ago. Someone had to imagine, oh, fly through the air like a bird in order to
Right.
make it happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those are the very aspects of humanity that often get denigrated, like it's all in your head. It's
Yeah.
only a dream. It's just your imagination, as though that doesn't matter when it's more important than anything else.
And then how many other people get that message at the same time? And that's why you see like a trend of books of the same topic coming out from different
That's true.
perspectives. And we're all dialed in all the time. So, how do you go from there? At what point did spirit releasement start to show up in your work? And how did it start to show up in your work?
Well, I like to have all of my clients use a pendulum, an ideomotor tool.
Yeah.
You hold the pendulum, looks like this for people that haven't seen that before. And I talked before about how your body is always speaking to you, and I've come to understand that a pendulum is really just an amplifier. It amplifies what your body's already telling you,
Yeah.
and you can set it up so you can get a yes answer, you can get a no answer, you can get a maybe, depending on how that pendulum is moving.
Mhm.
And this can very quickly lead you to the root of the problem. You don't have to spend a lot of time, wandering through past lifetimes and wandering through your childhood. You can go right to it by using the pendulum and asking the correct questions.
Yeah.
Well, for some people, pendulum just wasn't working, or you would attempt to take them to meet their spirit guide or go into a past lifetime, block, block, block. And I can't remember the first person with whom this happened or exactly how it happened, but I stumbled across this concept of a spiritual entity attachment. As you know, the spirit of a person who used to be in a body. We live in a free will universe. They didn't want to go to the light, heaven,
Yeah.
Valhalla, Eden, whatever you want to call it,
So
and
an
they stayed here on this
earthbound.
plane. And I would
Yeah.
say if they could be attached to a place, we call that a ghost. They could be
Mhm.
attached to a person. You could have multiple of them attached to you, and this they can bring with them their own fears, their own anxieties. They can bring with them kind of their own negative outlook. And they're all going to generally be vibrating at a very negative frequency, or else they would have gone into the light. They didn't go there because they were afraid.
No.
And if people have these attached to them, they may have a voice that really isn't them.
Mm-hmm.
They may find themselves with obsessions that aren't necessarily theirs.
Or addictions. Yeah.
Exactly. And so when I discovered this concept, and again, I can't remember exactly how I did this, but I stumbled across it. I might have read it in a book or something and been working with somebody that was stuck and blocked. And in some cases, the pendulum, if you ask, do I have any spiritual entities attached to me and or to my being? It's going to say yes, or it's going to say no. And I was starting to get yeses with people.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, okay. Do I have more than one? Yes. Did I know this person earlier in my present lifetime? Yes. One of them is Uncle Larry or whatever. And
Yeah.
and once I figured this out and understood how to move them out,
Yeah.
people they were benefiting from it. They were feeling lighter. They were feeling more free. They didn't have the negative voice in their head anymore. Their addiction or their obsession went away, or it was diminished. And then from there, the concept of something that is more rare in my experience, but it's more intense, and that's like, something evil.
Mm-hmm.
And what I discovered about this whole phenomenon is that it's like Velcro. In order for Velcro to stick, you have to have two sides, and they have to be very specific. One has to be a hook, one has to be a loop. And if you have that, you stick together.
Yeah.
And this all fits with the concept of a free will universe, that on some level, usually subconscious, a person agrees, even tacitly, to the attachment. And so when I started, like a lot of people, it was like, let's tear this out, let's cut the cords, no. If there's a problem, it's going to be on the client side.
Mm-hmm.
And clients will often say things like, when it's time to release the entities, I don't know why, but I have this horrible grief coming up about this.
Yep.
And once
Sorry.
again, you got to get, as you know, you got to get to the root of what is the relationship they have with this, or what is the entity doing for them. It might be like, if they leave, they've been with me for 40 years. If they leave, I'm going to be alone.
Yeah.
It might be the spirit of a child that they aborted.
That's bringing me back to my first spontaneous experience. I was working with a client who had cancer early on in childhood. She'd had just, event after event medically. And here she was, in her mid to late 20s, and she was wanting to finally thrive. And there was no reason for her to. So she was about to get married, lots of exciting things coming forward. But there's this fear of what happens if I get sick again. And then as we were working through the session, trying to get to the root, kind of like what you were talking about of, okay, where does this go? What else is here? And then she's telling me, oh, I see a face. I see a face of an older woman, and she seems like she's got some malice. She likes it when I'm sick. Where did she come from? She found me in the hospital. I wasn't going to make it. She supported me through. I was scared. She stayed with me. But then the flip side was, this entity wanted her to stay sick so that it could have a purpose and keep up the symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, that's such a
Yeah.
perfect example.
So
Such a perfect example of,
yeah.
if you just tried to go in and say, okay, you out, let's yank her out, let's cut the cords. It wouldn't work, because the client has their own Velcro-like attachment to the entity.
Right.
And the beautiful part of this is that when you approach it this way, you are rescuing not just your client, you're rescuing the entity that's attached to them, because you're helping them get to the point where they can release, to recognize it's in their best interests, to release and go to the light, which is where they should have gone in the first place.
Yeah. To continue their journey. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And not be
There's still a
stuck
soul.
on this plane without a body,
Right.
parasitically attached to somebody else.
I don't know about you, but I've also seen some where they come through from previous past lives, and they've
Oh yeah,
been with the client before they were the client
absolutely.
through multiple
Yes.
times and spaces. And it's like, holy moly, you two have had a journey.
Mhm.
Like, what can we do now to move this forward and have you keep growing and healing now?
Yeah, for sure. I had a client. I mean, I want to like right now, an existing client who had an entity attached to him from a past lifetime
Yeah.
that he was romantically involved with, and he murdered her in a past lifetime.
Yeah.
And she's trying to get back at him in this lifetime. She's not even incarnated in this life, and she's attached to him. He's carrying all this guilt from what he did, feels he deserves all the bad stuff that's happening.
There's the
And
entry.
so
Yeah.
it's a really thorny problem to start teasing apart. Like, when the jewelry chains get all meshed together and they turn into this big nasty knot.
What
That's what
was
these things can be sometimes, and you just have to start teasing it apart.
what was his presenting problem out of curiosity?
No joy.
I mean, that's definitely. I was wondering if he was having trouble achieving things, like actually having success.
Well, that's part of it. So
Yeah.
it's no joy, and it's like he says he keeps making bad investments. He keeps making money, and then he puts his money into something and loses it. And then when he's trying to get himself healthier, he's on a healthy path, and then he gets injured. So he's kind
Yeah.
of she's undermining him.
Yeah.
He believes he deserves the punishment all on a subconscious level, carrying around all this guilt, can't
Yeah.
experience joy. So it's working on healing the past lifetime
Yeah.
to be able to, through forgiveness, to have him be able to say, I don't deserve punishment anymore.
Mhm.
I've apologized for what I've done earnestly, and now I'm going to
Yeah.
let you go. And then for the entity to recognize that their future is better in the light than it is attached to him
Yeah.
through all of this darkness and negativity.
Because the whole time she's weighing him down, she's feeling it too. She's
Totally.
keeping herself in that very low vibration. That's
Yes.
uncomfortable.
They're both
Yeah.
stuck.
Yeah. Is it fair to say we are the spiritual Jerry Springers?
That's funny. I had never thought about that
Are we
before.
not?
I've often called myself a spiritual lawyer
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
because I think there's this concept I'm sure you're aware of contracts
Mhm.
that we make, that these are almost like agreements that depend on certain kinds of clauses. And if you understand the architecture of these agreements,
Yeah.
you can figure out how to unwind them. And it is said that a really good lawyer only asks questions of a witness that they already know what the answer is going to be.
Oh, okay.
So what I will often do with a recalcitrant client or a stubborn entity that doesn't want to leave is I'll just cut a deal with them. I'll say,
Yeah.
all right, so are you willing for 45 seconds to release this entity that you otherwise don't want to release, just to feel what it's like, with the proviso that you can take them right back at the end of 45 seconds,
Yeah.
knowing that when they do the release, they're not going to want them back.
Yeah.
So we go through the 45 seconds, tick tock, tick tock. And then I say at the end of 45 seconds, okay, do you want to take the entity back? And they're like, no, no, I don't. But it's like an artful lawyer-like approach that involves a bargain
Yeah.
or an agreement, and the agreement in that case is obviously, okay, you release for 45 seconds, but if you want to, and only if you want to, you can take them back. What do you have to lose?
Yeah. Do you also give the entity attached at that moment, a chance to have an experience of something different as well?
If they won't leave, yes.
Yeah.
If they're the stubborn one, I do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Through
Go
the client,
experience the light for
right? Through
a
the
couple of
client.
moments.
Say
Yeah.
to the entity, here's the deal. Will you go into the light for 45 seconds with the promise that you can come right back? I'm like, okay. They go to the light and like, well, they're not coming back now because they never do.
Yeah.
And all
No.
you have to do is watch those testimonials of people who've had near-death experiences. They all
Mhm.
They
Yes.
loved it. They were forced to come back.
Yeah, I've actually had personal experience. Not near death. It was not my death. I was 16, and I've told this story before. Eventually, my audience is going to get fed up with me. But my biggest bond at 16 was my ferret. Loved that ferret.
Mm.
Animals have always held a special place for me. It was winter. It was a small town. The vet was closed. She had cancer. I knew she was, coming up to it. And she was very, very sick. And that night, she opened all of my abilities. And then as she was passing, I got to experience the light. And that's why the podcast is Trauma and Transcendence, because I
Wow.
got to feel the light without me being in any
Yeah.
state. And so I was somewhere between waking and sleeping. And I see this from two perspectives when I remember it. It's the weirdest thing. Part of me can see my spirit sitting up in my body, and I can see my body reclined. It's just so weird. And I can see the ferret at the end of the bed. And she's telling me, I love you. I miss you. Thank you for everything you've done for me. I'm going to miss you. And I hear my soul having awareness that my mouth is closed. And I hear my soul saying back to her, I love you. I miss you already. Thank you. And I'm having these conscious moments of I should be sad. When I wake up, she's going to be gone. She's going to have passed. But the light was so, and I tell people it was like cheese. It was so tangible and palpable. Like I felt like I could cut it.
Mm.
So yes, I've had one-on-one experience with the light. So I know exactly why they don't want to come back.
Mhm.
Because if I can explain it, I used to say it's like unconditional love, but we don't have any concept of that here. It's more like I didn't want or need for anything. Nothing was wrong. I was complete. Its completeness, I think, is the best way for me to explain it.
Mhm.
And no, when we get that sensation, we don't want to come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think that there's just a general principle in life that if you try to force someone to do something,
Yeah.
they only have two options. They can either succumb and hate you,
Yeah.
or they can fight back. And neither one is a productive option.
Yeah.
And when you can give people choices, even spiritual entities, and and acknowledge their free will, and then also even fill in some of the details, like, for example, and you probably know this already, that some disincarnate spirits don't actually realize that they're dead. They thought maybe they were atheists or something, and they thought that when they died, that was the end of it. It was just nothing, complete oblivion, but they didn't lose their consciousness. And so they don't really understand why people can't see them,
Mm.
but they still think that they have a body. And
Yeah.
and sometimes they have to be brought up to speed and made aware of, look, you died,
Yeah.
but it was only your body that died. Your consciousness can't die. And you didn't go home. And home is where you're greeted by people who loved you in your lifetime.
Yeah.
You have nothing to fear by being there, and you have everything to gain. And because I've taken the client through reversing the contract of
Yeah.
allowing the entity to attach, right? They've declared their spiritual independence. They've said, you no longer have permission to be here.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go.
Yeah. And,
And
but it's
it's so
more
much better for you to
compassionate. Yeah.
go into your permanent home
Yeah.
than going back to wandering around on a plane where you don't have a body.
But I'm thinking about it from the client perspective. It's so much more compassionate
Yes.
to work with you on this to release the entity, because if you just rebuke and claim sovereignty and kick them out,
Yes.
they're just going to hijack the next right vibration.
That's
So
exactly right. And
yeah.
it could be painful, the process of separating, particularly if the client has their own attachment to the entity.
Yeah.
So the entity, as you know, it could be a 6-year-old child who died in a hospital
Yeah.
while you were in the hospital waiting for your wife to give birth.
Mm.
And that child attached to you because you looked like a compassionate person, which you are. And you're not just going to let that 6-year-old go. by themselves out on the street any more than if you found a child wandering around. You'd be like, ah, let her wander around, you know?
Except it's not always so conscious when we when
Right.
we do it. We're not always so
Exactly.
cognizant.
But if
Yeah.
you think about it on that level, that would explain why the client would resist that separation, because they don't want to just boot this kid out. But if you understand that it's a 6-year-old child that attached to this person in a hospital when they were waiting for their wife to give birth, then you would bring the child's grandparent or someone who loves that child from the other side, or an angel, or someone that you could make the handoff to. And this makes me think about how I was trained as an EMT. When you like, if you're on duty and you're in an ambulance or on a fire truck and you go to the scene where someone's injured, and you walk up as an EMT to somebody who's injured, you've taken control, you've taken responsibility for their well-being. And the law is you're not allowed to leave them until you hand them off to someone of equal training, stature, or higher. You can't just go, oh, I bandaged this guy up and I walked away. You can't do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's the we could think of it in the same way with spiritual entity attachments. And here's the thing that's really blown me away. Can I share this with you?
Please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was working with a really tapped in client, still working with him. And together, we discovered through his spirit guides that in the same way that you can facilitate, let's call it is salvation too highfalutin a word? It might be the rescue, it's something like that. In the same way you can facilitate that relief for a spiritual entity attachment, you can do the same thing for a demon.
Yeah.
Which makes perfect sense to me. That why would God create any creature that wasn't capable of redemption?
Yeah.
And I've been off and on watching this exorcist on YouTube, this Catholic priest named Father Chad Ripperberger.
Okay.
And he talks about why a demon flips out when you produce a crucifix. And he said, because it reminds them that the jig is already up.
Mm.
That when Jesus died on the cross, the game was over. They were finished. And when you remind them of this fact, it destroys them. And so that's something that I've started using in the rare instances when that kind of entity comes up. And I tell the client to tell the demon, you know how this is going to end.
Yeah.
This doesn't end well for you. You have an option. You have a chance right now to go to the light for redemption.
Yeah.
And what it's produced in the few people that I've worked with that have had these things is total confusion in the face that they described of the demon.
Mm-hmm.
And are you serious? Is that true?
Yeah.
And in one case, they went back to the light. And in another one, they were like in limbo, like not sure whether they were going or not. But I find this so thrilling that we could be a small catalyst in helping even something like a demon return to God.
Mm-hmm. I've only had one so far that didn't go back to the light. And this thing was it was in my client, and it was actually trying to come through as though it was a spirit guide. It was claiming to be Saint Germain, but something was fishy because it said, when I said, "Who are you?" It said Germain. I am Saint Germain. It's like, oh. And so I'm just like, who do you think you're playing with? So immediately I'm like, are you of the highest of light? And it was like, yes. Are you of the highest of light? Oh, fine. And it was just mad. But that was the only one that didn't want to go back to the light at all, even though I had reminded it. So I trained spirit release meant in 3 different ways. The first way, I wasn't taught about demons at all. We only talked about earthbound entities.
Mhm.
And in the second way, we talked about them, but it wasn't so much sending them to the light, and there was less empathy and compassion and more of a, ooh, I gotcha kind of a thing. And then the third way with Laura Whitworth, she's the one who does soul-centered healing hypnosis. And it has more of that compassionate element of, oh, we need them on some level in terms of the grander scheme of
Mhm.
things. We can't have light without the dark. All of this is for the ascension of Earth. They're just playing their role. And then
Mhm.
we're going to poop on them at the same time for, for taking that role so that we can all level up and ascend. That's harsh. So she takes the approach of reminding them that they are of God.
Mhm.
They just forget it. And so when you're talking about seeing the crucifix, my mind is wondering, is it that they, the fear of, oh, it's already over, we've already lost because salvation, or are they partially remembering, oh, I'm of source and that fall was so painful that it's hard to
I think
remember?
it's all. Personally think it's all the above.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I also think too that if you are dwelling in a very low vibratory state
Mhm.
and you're existing in a world of lies and deception and cruelty, that at some point
Yeah.
it must be absolutely horrendous. You know, sometimes you see these movies where
Yeah.
like a hitman wants or somebody wants to get out of the mob. Like
Mhm.
they won't let them.
Yeah.
They just like, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of the lying and the deception. I've had enough of the stealing and the killing and being chased and chasing other people. I've had enough. I want out.
Yeah.
And I imagine that that's what it's like for them. That maybe it was thrilling at first because it was this grand rebellion,
Yeah.
and they were able to stay fully in their ego. But no, no, I think that it's such a brilliant concept. You know, you don't like if you're fighting one army against another, you don't want to say we're not going to take your surrender
Mhm.
because then they'll fight to the last man.
Mhm.
If they know, hey, I can surrender and I'll be treated humanely,
Yeah.
your task isn't going to be as hard.
Accurate. And I think, when you're talking about vibration and then being low vibration, that has to feel like sandpaper to bare skin of feeling that high vibration. I know when I go places and I'm really well charged, I've taken good care of myself, I do grit against people who are not similar vibration. I am literally uncomfortable for them. And it's not that I'm trying to be. Um, but I'm shining light on things that maybe they weren't ready to look at. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking it's got to be that similar feeling. Yeah.
It could be, yeah.
I can't believe an hour has already gone by. I'm enjoying you so much. I could have you here for hours and hours. How does someone know when it's time to call Peter McLaughlin?
Um, a lot of the people that come to me have exhausted the conventional avenues, probably with you too,
Yeah,
and
of
they
the
are
last resort.
they're willing to try something else. And you know, they might see me on a podcast or their friend might tell them about me, and in some ways I kind of like that. I want people that whose minds have been opened, who are committed to their own freedom, to getting beyond what's been holding them back,
Yeah.
and who are willing um, to see it through. And I do think that when all of the easy quote unquote take this pill or whatever, when all that's been exhausted, then people are more willing to say, you know what, I don't want to keep living like this. I want something different. So you know, when to call, I mean, from my perspective, my is when you're ready for a change and you're ready to go in avenues you might not have considered going in before, but your mind is open to that, and you're willing, frankly, to put in the work. Like this is, as you know, this is not easy. People are confronting things that maybe they've been avoiding for a long time. You know, it may be that the kitchen is going to look worse after the first day of its renovation before it can be built back up. So I think, I mean, that's my rambling answer to your simple question.
Or if the last spiritual 2x4 was immensely painful and you just want relief, that's when you call Peter.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I was talking about this yesterday with somebody that a lot of, I think a lot of what we can provide for people through an alternative way of looking at whatever is causing them the most pain
Yeah.
is a sense of hope that they can begin to glimpse the light at the end of the tunnel. And that's, you know, the in Greek mythology with Pandora's box, that got slammed shut, and that was still in there, and then it had to be released again because it's such an important part that if we have hope, then we can find the strength to keep going. And I believe that we are endowed by our Creator with the capabilities of overcoming anything that we're presented with. It doesn't mean we will, but we have the capabilities. And the key is to not give up, is to persevere, is to recognize that every problem has an origin point, and that by finding that origin point and resolving it, and then maybe doing some other things along the way, you can shift, you can change. None of us is etched in.
Yeah. And then choosing to use that beautiful gift of free will that we've got to take some ownership and take an active role in our healing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Because at the end of the day, you and I and doctor, you know, MDs and psychologists and everybody in a helping profession, we're helpers along the path. You know, and like a spotter in a gym, if you're lifting weight, it sometimes it's just their presence,
Yeah.
or them saying to the person, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. Or maybe they give them 3 pounds of pressure, and that's enough for them to put it up. I mean, we're capable of so much more than we realize in the moment.
And we
And
forget.
having somebody walking your path with you for a short distance that can help you navigate this path and help encourage you when it feels like you don't know which way to go. Sometimes that's enough.
That's really beautiful. Where do people find you? Where's your preferred
At my
method?
website, which is blueskyhypnosis.com. And for people who are interested in dipping their proverbial toe in the water, I have a YouTube channel with about 200 videos. There's about 120,000 subscribers there, and you can read what people write on these different videos, and you can sample them for yourself. You know, listen to some of the videos and see if it helps you sleep better. See if it reduces the anxiety. See if you resonate with my voice and with my approach. So that's another place that people can go, and it's the channel name is also Blue Sky Hypnosis.
And dear listeners, I will put that in the show notes for you. So all of Peter's links will be right there. You'll be able to find him easily and get to enjoy more of his work and your very lovely presence. Thank you so much. This has been so nice.
Well,
I've
you're welcome,
enjoyed
and you're a
you.
lovely presence too. And thank you for this
Oh,
time.
it went by so fast. But as always, dear listeners, have bright, beautiful days. I'm wishing you so much peace, serenity, and healing. And remember, healing happens together. Bye for now. Thank you for joining us on this transformative episode of Trauma and Transcendence. Your stories matter. I would love to hear them and from you. Connect on our website, healingbeyondtrauma.com, or drop me an email at amanda@healingbeyondtrauma.com. Remember, healing is a journey we take together. Until next time, stay connected, stay inspired. This is Amanda, wishing you bright blessings.